One of course, certainly one of the biggest surprises, I think many, shall we say, or maybe not. This is really the big question. I think a lot of people have been asking, what were the reasons these red wall voters voted for the Tories in the first place? After all, they are no friends to the red wall. You look at their policies that they are suggesting now of lower taxing, um, you know, getting rid of more public services, continuing austerity, um, quote, funding just enough, not enough to actually make a proper change in these, again, the red wall areas or these left behind areas, but breadcrumbs. So it feels like at least they've got something, but not everything that would actually make a change. And you see this in the Northern Research Group, very, very worried about the fact recent polls have shown that in these red wall seats, Keir Starmer is ahead in the polls on them. And that from that poll, indeed, just taken before Christmas and New Year, if there was a general election, they lose their seats, and Starmer would win. Starmer would win. He'd have obviously a minority government. He wouldn't have a massive majority like Boris Johnson currently, shall we say, enjoys now. But at least they'd be out. Of course, the big problem then would then come, of course, bringing change to the country. That would be the next big problem we have here. So we have huge problems here. And of course, you've got the fact that we've lost 4% of our GDP, and yet they want to cut taxes, to the public services that people want. And I've said this time and time again, when you poll people of the UK, they want, progressive services. They want high taxes on corporations and, again, the rich. They want good public services and they want them to be funded. It's not exactly what the Tories say they are going to be doing on a daily basis, but that's their thing. And the next election is either going to be this year or next year. That's the big question. Is it going to be this year? Could in November we be having another general election? We don't know. We could have one next year. We generally don't know. MPs are still very in two minds about whether there is going to be an election this year or next year. So where we are seeing Keir Starmer do stuff, like he's basically just come out recently and said there needs to be a windfall tax, which I only said a couple of days ago that this is what Starmer needed to do to completely destroy the Tories on this, and he has come out on this literally this morning, I believe. So fantastic news. But anyway, we'll get into this and find out a bit more about this, because I think this is very worth repeating, that these red wall people, these Brexiteers, the Tories, they are not your friends. They do not have your best interests in heart at all, because they've got no policies that would actually help you in your area or even your families if you are in these situated red wall seats or in that catchment area. So let's go diving in on here and find out what's going on. So, as always, please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. Of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel. So let's dive in on this. So this comes from The Guardian with the title of Neoliberal Brexiteers Are No Friends of the Red Wall. Apart from his bad luck in being struck twice by the need to go into isolation from COVID, the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, has a huge, indeed historic weight on his shoulders. To put it bluntly, this government is so appalling that if, as it hopes, it is re-elected either this year or next, many of us will be seriously tempted to emigrate. The sleaze that finally overturned the once of the steadfast Tory seats in the land, namely North Shropshire, has brought to mind a line from Imperium, a novel by my old friend Robert Harris. Cicero describes a dodgy politician as giving corruption a bad name. The reaction to Johnson's government in the polls and in the voluminous acres of the the spine of the Tory press may be sort of heartening to Starmer, but only up to a point. What we are witnessing, and goodness, it has taken time, is the eternal wisdom of the great observation attributed to Abraham Lincoln. You can fool all the people some of the time, and some of the people all the time, but you cannot fool people all the time. It is reassuring to those who are unrepentant Remainers, and the wider public appears to be waking up to the economic and socially damaging impact of Brexit. This development, along with the chaotic sleaze of Johnson's government, is giving rise to open rebellion within the Tory ranks and speculation about who will succeed him. The problem is here that the candidates are all of the same mould. All horse in horse racing terms, they are all sired by Brexit, and their dam is austerity. The point about Brexit, as emphasised on Lord Frost's own resignation letter from his in his post chief as his post in chief negotiator, is that it was the neoliberal coup that made this country a lightly low regulated, low tax entrepreneurial economical zone at the cutting edge of modern science and economic change. No matter that, Frost before the referendum was on record acknowledging that we were better off with the EU. No matter all that stuff about being the cutting edge and so and so much can't. The main point is that the attempting, in Lord Lawson's notorious words, to finish the Thatcher revolution with Brexit. The Brexiteers were opposing the social democratic and interventionist nature of the EU in favour of giving free rein to market forces and English nationalism. They were abandoning a market that really mattered, the single market, an enlightened intergovernmental creation championed by Thatcher. What Starmer needs to do is stop trying to pacify red wall former Labour voters and get across to them that Brexit was essentially a war against them and against the socially compassionate nature of the founding principles of the EU, principles that have been made a mockery of by the long squeeze of the NHS and the social services generally. In his magnum opus, The Betrayal of Liberal Economics, Professor Amos Woodson laments the way that they became collectivism or state prevention is associated with political tyranny of communist regimes. There has been, since the collapse of the USSR, from another form of unnoticed oppression, the tyranny of markets. He suggests instead of subjugating all public provision to the scrutiny of markets, we should subjugate markets to the scrutiny of social constructed criteria. Now, I have noticed that there have been many references recently to the debt that we owe Clement Attlee, the Labour Prime Minister from 1945 to 51, by whose beneficent administration was the NHS was founded. Starmer, for one, has been singing his praises. Attlee, like Franklin Roosevelt before him in the US, sought the right balance between private and public provision. The ideological Brexiteers do not. One of the reasons Frost adduced to his resignation is that Johnson was going in the wrong direction by planning to raise taxes and increase public provision, even though this is the forced consequence of dealing with the COVID. Chancellor Sunak has also made it plain that he wants to cut taxes before the next election. Johnson is actually unpopular among many of his colleagues for being a big spender. The thrust of the policies is such of potential successors to Johnson as Sunak and the one and only Liz Truss would be the Brexiteer doctrine of low taxes and continuance of austerity. They do not appear to take into account that the knocking off the 4% of GDP with Brexit, due to the OBR's own estimate, and they have damaged the prospective tax revenues so badly that their tax cutting plans will have horrifying implications for public services, or perhaps that just doesn't worry them. Attlee must be spinning in his grave, and I'm sure that Starmer and his advisors are aware of the implications of all this. They should be championing the EU and not being embarrassed by their association with their Remain campaign. Let us hope that they can bring the electoral baton home. And I really do not want to have to emigrate. And I sort of with William Keane here, who wrote this article here, we have an absolutely awful government at the moment. And not only this, we've had the COVID crisis. There's the aftermath that we are just at the beginning of now, of how we're going to get out of this, because I'd like to remind people we are in a pretty much an economic disaster at the moment because of COVID. Not only that, but you pile on Brexit and the economic chaos that has caused as well. It is a completely perfect storm. And yet, remember, go right back to 2019, where we knew COVID was coming. We could see the disaster unfolding. We didn't know how long, of course, it would be, of course, or how bad it was. But the whole idea was, whoa, let's just hold on and see what happens with this pandemic first. And then maybe let's think about Brexit. But no, of course, Brexiteers being Brexiteers, wanted to get out of the EU as quickly as possible and pull that lever as fast as they possibly could. Like I say, they literally were chomping at the bit to trigger Article 50 because they daren't let anything rest or sink in. They were pretty much, we've got to carry on this momentum. We've got to ride this wave as fast and possible as we can. And this is the worrying thing, where we've seen, just as Boris Johnson's put out very recently, that he wants to build on the successes of Brexit and, be faster as well. Again, very worrying. But I believe that was put out to try and, so we say, pacify some of these leading Brexiteers. And it is indeed very worrying for some of the plans that they have. I mean, just at the end there, it highlights the point of, you're going to be cutting taxes, but we've lost 4% GDP. That is going to have a catastrophic effect on revenue coming into the government, and then indeed paying money to public services. So all through this, what's Starmer got to do? Well, first of all, he's got to be brave about when it comes to the EU. He cannot be, it's one of those things where you cannot be either or. You can't straddle the fence on this. You've really got to come down on one side or the other. And yes, Starmer can say, well, they've made a mess of Brexit. We're going to do it, quote, right. One of the right ways you could actually do Brexit correctly is actually rejoin the single market and customs union, because after all, Leave did say that we wouldn't be leaving that. And of course, not only that, that solves the Northern Ireland issue literally with a stroke of a pen. And then you obviously get the Brexiteers furious, asking, well, what was the point of all this? What was the point of Brexit? To which all he has to do is turn around and just say, well, what was the point of Brexit? Tell us. As far as he is concerned, Starmer has fulfilled the will of the people, because, again, Leave said we wouldn't be leaving the single market and customs union. So as far as I'm concerned, any future prime minister, any future government can take the UK back into the single market customs union with no referendum on, and not even have to have a vote either in Parliament, because that's what the Brexiteers did. So guess we can go back in, guys. But of course, as we always said, we would eventually end up on the path to being back to the EU anyway. It's pretty much inevitable. So sooner or later, we will end up rejoining the EU. Again, it's not a matter of if, it's just when, because the economic damage of leaving is going to be so blatant and so obvious, and the businesses are going to be so up in arms saying, this is awful, this is terrible, just rejoin the EU, that even the Tories themselves are going to have to, well, be under their own, shall we say, worry about what their own donors are now saying to them about rejoining the EU. And trust me, it happened once, it will happen again. So for that, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, thank you very below there are the links to my Patreon page and a one-off link. And thank you very much to everyone who does support the channel that way. And of course, we'll see you all next time.